Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scary Bad Reviews, and this is my intro.
Get the fuck out of my room! I'm playing Minecraft!
So, we are back in the greatest time of the year. It is October 1st. It is officially spooky season. It is time to crack out your jack-o'-lanterns, your Halloween decorations, start planning your costumes, piling up some good candy and some makeup and, special effects to put together a great night. We are kicking off my annual 31 movies for Halloween, specifically, doing a movie every single day in the month of October. Usually I pick a theme for it, and this is my fourth annual run of things. And this year I am looking to portray classics coverage. So each week, each 7-day block, I'm going to be picking a classic monster that started in the Universal movies era and pick 7 movies pertaining to that monster that kind of show both its evolution across the time, as well as the different angles that people take on it within the genre. This first week we're going to be covering vampires, then I'm going to have a week on werewolves, going to have a week on zombies, going to have a week that's split between Frankenstein and Mummy, and then I'm going to have 3 days at the end of this month that I'm going to be covering mashup movies. So these are movies that include all of these monsters together, not necessarily the zombie one as much, but combining these classic Universal monsters together at the end of the month. So we are kicking off our first week, our vampire week, with the original vampire movie. Not necessarily the original, because we have Nosferatu back in the early 20s, but the first big scale, really getting it out there, what we base most of our knowledge of vampires on, and that's Dracula. The original Dracula from Universal Pictures came out in 1931. It stars Bela Lugosi as Dracula. It's the standard story that a lot of us have heard. Jonathan Harker goes to Transylvania to meet this count, sees that there's something mystical about him. The count ends up following him back to England to buy property in England, and then a whole bunch of random events start happening in the area. People start having these weird dreams and occurrences, and people are just drawn toward the count. They don't understand it. It definitely sets a lot of the precedents that we have about vampires up for Hollywood. A lot of the rules that we know of come from this movie. A lot of the powers of a vampire come from this movie. I don't necessarily feel the need to say a spoiler-free in a spoiler section because it's Dracula. I mean, people know what they're getting into when they're watching the movie. I gave the movie, rewatching it, I've seen it plenty of times. Rewatching it, I gave the movie an 8 out of 10. I think there's a lot of things that, even for the time period, they do very well. I understand that there is a level of difficulty in going back and watching these movies that are, 30s and 40s and even early 50s, in that there's a certain standard that we have now in our writing and our production and our technology that a lot of it feels, just bad. Like, some people who wouldn't necessarily be used to an older movie would just feel that the movie was poorly made, or that it was bad, or that it was poorly written. And that's not the case. This was a different time. This was different standards in Hollywood. They didn't have 3 years to write a movie and then 6 months to another year to film it and edit it and put all these things together. That wasn't the time frame back then. Back then you had a much shorter time frame, and you weren't able to just throw millions and millions of dollars at a movie to try to get it to work. I gave the movie an 8 out of 10. Some of the big things that really make this movie succeed is Bela Lugosi's just really, it's an odd charisma that he is able to carry about himself throughout the movie. We all know that vampires have sort of this sexual attraction aspect. They're very promiscuous creatures. They're driven by different aspects of life that we find to be on the edge, because they kind of look for things to fill their years. One of the very big things for vampires is the drawn to mystery. It's the sexual mystique and promiscuous, air they have about them. And, we can see that now a a lot easier with a lot of the actors that we have in Hollywood. And when you see Bela Lugosi, that's not necessarily what you would think. But in the movie, he finds this way to be this like mystic, charismatic thing that you just can't take your eyes off of. He does a very good job of portraying the Count. He does a very good job at setting the precedent for, you know, the classic vampire that we've seen on film and on TV. They do some really cool editing tricks with him as well. One of the possibly the simplest effect I've seen in a very long time is that whenever he is trying to use his vampire abilities to control other people, they kind of dim the lights on the rest of the scene, and I think it's just a simple mirror reflection of light onto his eyes, and just the way that they're able to get your attention directly onto his eyes, it works so well for the character, and really pulling attention to the vampire abilities and and not necessarily the powers, but well, yeah, kind of the powers that they have. His performance in it is great. His interactions with Dr. Van Helsing, who's played by Edward Van Sloan, are awesome. Edward Van Sloan does a very good job of playing a very calculated scientific man in Van Helsing, who also has a little bit of edge of crazy to him for studying the unknown and what he prefers to experiment with. The interactions between the two of them are awesome. You can really tell that there's kind of a respect between the two of them, even though they're almost mortal enemies, and you know that's kind of delved into further on in different adaptations in Hollywood. But in this situation with limited information, you can really tell that even though they're enemies and they're bound to try to destroy each other, there really is a sense of mutual respect. And at one point, Dracula even says that you know, Van Helsing is a very strong-willed man, as Dracula tries to control him, and it doesn't work. But he does a great job within the movie of portraying himself in that manner. The dialogue between the two is awesome. It makes you really feel like you're back watching an old classic monster movie, which you are. But that's really one of the things that establishes the mood and the feel and the tone of the movie, is the interactions between those two, as Dr. Van Helsing kind of brings a severity to the situation. Beforehand, it might have felt a little goofy, and it might have felt like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. We got a dude that's a little bit weird that a lot of people like. What's going on? And then Dr. Van Helsing brings in and brings to light, you know, all these things that are adding up for something to genuinely be wrong with the Count. The scene where Dr. Van Helsing realizes that you cannot see Dracula's reflection in the mirror is an awesome scene. It's another establishing factor in the legacy of vampires. And when he shows that to Dracula, that he noticed it, there's an awesome reaction out of it, and it really kind of gets the gears going of everyone genuinely believing that something is wrong with Dracula. Another great performance in it is Dwight Frye, who plays Renfield. The ability to display emotion, I think, was very difficult back in this era of movies. With black and white, it doesn't always necessarily help to accent your face. There's a lot of, they didn't have some of the camera angles that they do now. They don't necessarily understand some of the aspects of cinematography that we do now. But his ability to display just pure insanity and rage as Renfield throughout the movie is great, and it's possibly my favorite part of the movie. He does such a good job at overacting his facial expressions that you really see, you know, the insanity displayed even just through his eyes alone. Him playing this demented person who gets caught up in the realms of Dracula and having to be his servant. He does such a good job throughout the movie at just seeming like he's purely insane. The scenes where Dracula is either there as a bat or a dog and he's speaking to Renfield but no one else can hear it, does a great job at, you know, really showing the fear in his soul of his master. And the end scene in the crypt where Dracula finally kills Renfield, you can really hear this fear and this manic break in Renfield's voice, and that he's pleading with him. He said, "You can torture me, you can do this, you can do that, but please do not kill me, as I must atone for the sins you caused me to act upon." There's really this moment of that line that it really sinks in that while Dracula was controlling him and he was crazy, he still was aware of everything that he was doing and he regrets everything that's happened. There's a couple things in the movie that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I was not the biggest fan of the performance of John Harker or of Mina Harker. I think that both the actor and the actress that played those parts, really didn't bring any justice to the characters. I think David Banner's portrayal of Jonathan Harker really just made John Harker look like a whiny crybaby about the whole situation. Really just kind of being a person that's on the outside looking in and just really, sad and worried all the time and not necessarily willing to do anything about it. Helen Chandler's portrayal of Mina Harker is not as bad. She does a good job at, near the end of it, really displaying herself in a full change and a full metamorphosis when she becomes a vampire. I don't know, something about her playing the character really threw me off. I don't know what it was. I just didn't really believe any of the fear that she tried to show. I didn't believe any of the pain that she tried to show when she was a vampire and they had the crucifix out. Those were really the only two moments that I could genuinely take points away from the movie for. Like I said before, there is a level of difficulty in watching a movie as old as this, but that's not, like, I can't hold that against the movie. I can't hold the time period against the movie. There are a couple moments in the movie that are great. There's some great performances. One of them even is attributed to cinematography in that there is the scene of where the boat that Dracula's being brought over on, when it arrives in London, everyone on the boat is dead and all their bloods ran dry from Dracula. But when they open the bottom to get down into the actual boat, they only see a box and Renfield just staring up into the light, and the angle that they have going down the stairs in the boat with nothing else around him but a light just shining on Renfield. It's a very chilling scene. Like they did a very good job, and it genuinely does make you uncomfortable, which did surprise me on this rewatch because I had known the scene before and I just didn't remember this emotion being attached to it. But all in all, there are a lot of great things about this movie. Casual moviegoers nowadays, I don't know if they'd be able to make it through it. If you're a dedicated horror fan and you really want to get to the roots of where a lot of things in Hollywood started, especially with horror, I do suggest that you watch the movie. It is a very good movie. It does not feel like a chore to watch. It's an hour and a half, and it really does kind of whiz by. It's actually on public archives as well, so it's not very difficult to get a hold of it to watch it. And I definitely recommend it to anybody to kick off their Halloween mood. So yeah, Dracula 1931 was an 8 out of 10.
Whack.
So that is it for our first day of October. If you come back tomorrow, I'm going to be doing another version of the Dracula story, and that is labeled as Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, featuring the internet's favorite actor, Keanu Reeves, got Gary Oldman, Anthony Hopkins. It's a very loaded cast. I watched it recently, earlier this year, and I really am excited to be able to put out my thoughts on it. It's surprisingly a lot better than I expected it to be. So come back tomorrow for that. We will continue the vampire trend over the next 7 days, moving into zombies and werewolves and Frankensteins and mummies and all these different mashups. As always, if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. If you have an idea for me across these 31 days, my plan is not set in stone. I have 31 movies written out, but at any given time, one could be bumped out and a better one could be put in place of it. So if you have any ideas for me, please let me know. And thank you for listening.